Okay, good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarajo, and welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do here every Monday afternoon to try and figure out the future for smarter buildings. So it's really good to have you with us today. In case you are wondering who we are, our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org. And also just to remind everyone that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. Keep that in mind. And please do post questions and comments on the Zoom chat. It makes it much more interactive and interesting. And if you don't want anything that's on this slide deck, it is also available on mondaylive.org. So this being the second Monday in March, we're continuing to talk about, are we AI ready? We talked about that a lot last week. We talked about really what being AI ready is all about. Our agenda today, our normal chit chat, and then we're really going to be asking the question, are the buildings AI ready? Last week we were asking, are we AI ready? We meaning the industry. So here we want to sort of narrow it down to sort of thinking about the buildings as being whether they're AI ready or not, and what the consequences of even asking that question is. Have a discussion around that. So looking forward to that. But before we get to that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken for an update from Automated Buildings. Over to you, Ken.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, I apologize for an over-busy graphic, but again, there's an awful lot going on in not only the Monday Live and C4SB world, but in the other worlds that Automated Buildings touches. First thing is Saturday was International Women's Day. We have a post, and a lot of the folks had a lot of posts. I really liked it this year because the women sort of chose to celebrate what they were actually doing, the impact they were having on their respective industries. And I think that was a much better approach than they have in the other years. But I was just totally amazed as I flipped through all of the presentations and just taking a look at what they are doing. The other thing that I thought was kind of cute is we were doing the summaries for our AHR sessions, and we had an AHR session that was basically the practical use of AI, and was an hour session. And we asked AI to draw us a graphic, and it drew that little graphic up just to the right of the celebration. And it shows us all sitting around Aladdin's lantern, and it shows, I believe it's a figure of a woman. So there you go. AI is a woman. I thought that was a cute ad.
It's official.
Yeah. The one below that is, are we AI ready? That's our summary of last week. Anto asked me to do an overview of that. So if you click on the talking head, you can see what I had to say, which is basically AI is in the mind of the beholder, and the diversity that it brings us is just truly amazing, certainly in my understanding. In addition to that, we had this article out of New Zealand, Sustainable AI, Can Smart Energy Efficiency Fight Cyber Threats? And what he's suggesting there is, as we get this stuff doing what we think it should, it will create a fingerprint, or maybe it's a snowflake, might be a better definition of it. And any variance in that snowflake, whether it might be a hack or it might be a shift in energy usage, we can detect. So I think that's an interesting concept. Well, once we have all of this data in front of us. Going back to the right, to the left-hand side, down at the scale, Chemo made it off to the scale convention in Pasadena. And what I love about that is that picture of Chemo Kimon in front of the Pasadena event is you can see that he has the scale thing figured out. He's as tall as the building. Look at that. He's there, and he had a presence there that was as huge as he is there as well. I had a chance to take a look at some of the interviews he's done. He's actually just done a post. It just came online on automated buildings. We'll get it up to the top as after today's session. So yeah, that's just a lot of stuff going on. It looked to me like he found a whole bunch of people that talk as funny as we do, and they have some great ideas. So I thought that was just amazing. I think you're going to want to watch what Kimon's going to bring us in the next few days. He actually gives us a preview of the interviews he did get done. Moving right over to the middle there, there's this actual controller that belongs, I like this because its controller belongs to no one, but it belongs to everyone because it's Frankenstein from basically open hardware bits. And I think that's interesting. That's also been one of our greatest reads. It's from one of our old contributing editors, Calvin Slater. And he's just throwing it out there. But open hardware begets open software, and this stuff all fits together. But the other thing it's showing is that it's not just for the large corporate companies. It's allowing the home hobbyists to get into the business with, and ironically enough, their platforms are all Linux. So it's fairly easy for them to just download open software and start putting this together. And this is what they've been asking of our industry for a long time. Is anytime they come into our industry, they ask, where's your resources? Because they're used to working where they actually download great big pieces of software. They don't actually write the code. So that's an interesting concept, I think. There was right next to that is a post by Danielle. She brought out this, how old is AI? And she gets back to the 1950s and talks about that. And she even challenged it if it was older than Ken Sinclair and Keith Gibson, but no, not quite. But it's I was on the scene before then, but it did significantly change my life because what I grew up was in the early 70s was an era of computer simulation. And when we first got computers, even when we had mainframes, we found the power of using them to simulate buildings. And I was doing that in the early 70s with paper cards, which actually a conversation broke out in our Wednesday session about paper cards. And I was surprised to see how many people had actually touched the paper card era. Anyway, we worked through that, and then it was into the 1975 was the first time that I got involved with a direct digital control system and kind of creating that. So we've been at this for a while, but our point is very important that AI is not that new. The concepts have been around. It's just mostly communications and it's just some of the agents that have been written lately that have kind of changing our views. Moving right across there, the statecraft policymakers in an age of digital twins. This is a man I admire for a while, Rob. He's a European, and they've been working about this, and he's actually created a book that's that I think may be of use for anybody that's on the edge of trying to make sense of this and the democracy of AI and the democracy of digital twins. And then below that is Suha, who's one of our contributing editors. She's an AI instructor at Stanford, and she's just talking about how AI can actually extract wisdom. And I think that's an interesting concept and pointing it. So just a lot of things happening simultaneously. I don't know. I sometimes have a hard time just grasping what's going on. Not sometimes, most of the time. Back to you, Anto.
Yes, it's you're starting to have quite a lot of things in your slide that's going on, that's reflecting the sort of the busyness of really what's going on in this industry. So that's crazy and it's great at the same time. Thank you very much. Beyond that, the link board is normal. Want to open it up to others to share any thoughts or news that's come up. Hearing nothing, let us proceed then. Are we AI ready? So the question that we want to ask this week is, are our buildings AI ready? That's kind of right, the framing of this. And what does that mean? So a building, I mean, the sort of the thesis of this sort of conversation is that a building is either AI ready or not AI ready. And we've been seeing, I think we've all been seeing this sort of meme going on on LinkedIn that says something on the line of AI is not going to take your job. It's somebody with AI that's going to take your job. That whole sort of framing of it. And so the version of this that we came up with for buildings is that AI won't take your tenants, but buildings that is AI ready will. In other words, AI readiness is really a sort of somewhat of a predictor of how good a building would run. That's kind of the thesis of this. What does that mean? If you're a technology provider, then it means that really the technology that should be going into these buildings can be AI ready. If the building itself is AI ready, it means that facility managers can embrace the insights that come out of AI-driven technologies, and you can actually make decisions based on what AI can provide you that will actually help the buildings become more efficient. So that, there's different ways of looking at it, but basically that's kind of the way we want to frame this AI readiness of buildings themselves. I think we talked quite a bit about what this really means last week, but we just want to dig in specifically some more. So I'm going to open it up to the floor.
If we were to break that down into more practical terms, I'll pose this as a question. Are we saying things like AI buildings will run more efficiently and use less energy? For instance, AI buildings will require maybe less staff, therefore making the cost of operations lower. AI buildings will create better comfort and a better experience for tenants, for instance, and therefore AI, ready buildings will attract more tenants and cost less to operate in the future. Is that sort of an applied version of what we're saying here?
Yeah, I would agree. I think, Tracy, one thing that you could add to it is the cost of the overall cost of maintaining the building, not just the people, but the services and the mechanical and electrical systems that are going to wear out over time. So it will extend their life by doing a better job of anticipating when they're failing or about to fail.
So if we were to extend that thinking to, with the end in mind, right? Let's start at the end point and then figure out what the journey needs to look like. AI buildings will be much more digitally integrated, meaning, for instance, things like tying actual equipment performance to ticketing systems and attaching ticketing systems to staffing systems and things of that nature, right? So when we talk about an AI ready or an AI enabled building even, that's the kind of things that we're talking about here. Agreed?
Agreed.
Just to paint the picture. And then I think the key question that we were debating in an earlier call was what's needed to get us from here to that vision? Why aren't we there already?
Another
the-
important piece I
That's
think
the
we could
readiness
add,
part of it, right? That's the readiness. Is it ready? Are the buildings ready to?
Values,
Okay.
which you
And
just
that-
done a
that-
good job of articulating. Yep.
okay, another piece I think we need to add though is the cyber. Is it cyber secure? If one building is cyber secure, has more security than the other, I think that will be a big advantage as well. And that's going to be part of the AI readiness.
Kevon points out a good point. We always kind of forget about this. I think as technologists, we think about applications of AI that lean towards integration and lean towards machine learning. But he points out buildings will be able to have a conversation with us. So if you start tying these to large language models, he is quite literally correct, I think, on that front. Whereas we used to have to go on a UI and type in some things and ask some, or put in some commands. Now we'll just ask the building, what's going on? What's about to fail? Anything I need to be concerned about?
Right.
That kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that the way to frame? Because last week we talked about what it means to be AI ready, and partly we were talking about that you must have data, right? Which is a very practical thing. But it's beyond that, right?
Yeah, I think, and Steve Dodd pointed out something too. Not every AI enabled or AI ready building is going to implement everything in a 100% vision, right? So it's different. It will mean different things to different groups or different buildings. Even I think that's a good point.
But I think the key there, it must be able to do everything.
Right.
That's kind of the
Yes.
interesting of the internet is I
Yeah.
can talk to anybody in the world on the internet.
Yeah.
Right. There is nobody that's been excluded. So it's the same thing with this. I should be able to do any of those things that you were rattling off. The answer is yes to all of them.
Right. Doesn't mean you'll
Yeah.
do all of them, but you should be enabled to do them at your
Exactly.
choice. Yep. Right.
That's the
So
double.
definitely, I want to point out more than just HVAC control or lighting control, or, I mean, this is tying in other systems that are inevitably running inside of buildings, right? As well. When we talk about a truly AI-enabled building, it
Mhm.
goes beyond just the core applications that we typically talk about.
And I think that the third example that I had on the slide, which is now no longer up there, is decision making about how to operate, daily decision making about what to do about the building, what to do today and what to do next year, maintenance and all that kind of stuff. All of that is enabled by having all of the as much data as possible. Right, Rick?
Yes. The thing is, we don't have data and we don't have systems that are providing data. So making decisions is, God, there was this great picture of somebody sitting in a control room looking at 7 different screens to try and decide what to do with the next dollar or the next hour of time or money, what to do with their building. You have to go look at 7 different screens. You have to look at the capital planning, the maintenance. You have to look at the tenant surveys. You have to look at HVAC lighting. every one of them is a different screen. And then you write it all down on a notepad and then you try and make sense out of what should I do with my next hour or my next dollar. And all of the different examples of how a building could be better, whether it's comfort or tenant experience or just usefulness, whatever the building's supposed to do. People don't have systems that can talk yet, and we're a long ways away from that. So the systems all exist, they all work in their silos, but you have to go to seven different systems to be able to, and then, like I said, write it all down, be able to make better decisions. We know what a well-run, efficient building would look like. We just don't have systems that are able to work together to be able to be talked to. So, yeah.
So when you say we don't have data, and you've said that many times in the last couple of years, I think people always sort of react to that saying, "What do you mean you don't have data? We have a lot of data." What do you actually mean?
Well, data is used by applications. Otherwise, data wouldn't exist. So the only reason there's any data is because there was an application that either was written to use the data or to produce the data. And those applications are all different. So the data is therefore all different. And no two sets of data work. You can't use this data with that app, and you can't use this app with that data. So effectively, the data is inaccessible because it was all created for the particular app that it was created for. So this notion of having lots and lots of data is sort of false, in that the data isn't usable except for the app that it was created to work on. So then we go through this process, and maybe AI, somebody said it on our earlier call, maybe AI will help us get that data, quote, data to a point where it's actually usable for AI. Which was that Tracy or was that Anno that said that?
Yeah,
It was
I
Tracy.
think I said that. Yeah.
But the data is this false. All the data that exists, that Symmetrics has, for instance, it was all it's in a data model for the use of the app, where the app creates data that is specific to that app. And so normalizing data is it's not that we don't have data, it's that it's not usable for different apps. So it's definitely not usable for AI yet.
But AI is the thing that will make it usable.
Tracy had that great quote.
Yeah, I very much believe in that. And
If you talk with somebody who's really committed to the use of AI tools, there are companies now who proclaim to be AI first, right, in their thinking and the way they address problems and take care of business. The first thing somebody in a company like that would do is let's ask AI or tell AI, hey, there's this data over there, go get that and use it in this way, as opposed to going and creating a standard, right? They would do things like have AI take care of cybersecurity, right? Because all the criminals are using AI for cyber attacks. So I think it's that AI first mentality to solve the problem that we might be underestimating, some of us, myself included, in all of this. So that was kind of the point behind that comment, and I think it's going to be more helpful than we probably give it credit for at this point. And just in my own experience of doing like energy analysis and so forth, when I first started, I had everything in a spreadsheet, nicely organized and every spreadsheet was the same and the column headings were exactly the same. So that when I was comparing one building to another building, everything was the same. There was no confusion. And then I realized that I just needed to say column A is this, column B is that, column E on the other spreadsheet is the same as column B in this one. Yeah, you know, and it took care of all that detail. I didn't have to spend the time in all the formatting and everything that I was doing.
Hmm.
So it's that kind of a thought that occurred to me.
And
So,
that's really about usable and accessible data. It's not just about data. It's about
Yeah. So if
being
you can
able to
get connected,
use
there
it.
still is that getting the access that we talked a little bit about last week, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about. I think that's the most important part of this whole equation.
yeah, so the two principles that I'm hearing, and Tracy just mentioned the first of them, which is accessibility. Can I get to the information? And then the other is, to me, is interoperability. So is the data interoperable? Um, Assuming you can get to it, because I'm just looking for one word that describes whether it's modeled correctly, whether it's understandable, what all the different ways,
But
properties of the
usable,
data, but it's usable, right?
usable is the key word.
Okay,
That's
so
what we're talking
usable,
about.
fine, instead of interoperable, right? But the interoperable is a key feature, meaning that the standalone systems can interoperate, right? It's not enough that the applications, that an AI application has to, you know, go independently to each and every source. The sources themselves need to be able to talk with one another, irrespective of an AI app, right? So I don't think we want to give up on interoperability. It's not necessarily isn't necessarily part of the conversation of AI per se, but I certainly don't want to overlook it as a key element that we've been talking about for a while now. Is the idea of interoperability? But yeah, you're right. The data has to be useful and it has to be accessible.
Interoperability is the technical attributes of the information that we want, so they can operate in different ways. But usable is just a much more plain word that we can talk about. Data has to be usable, otherwise it's just what Rick's point is. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, that could open a whole other can of worms. When we say usable, exactly what do we mean by usable, right?
Well, right. Yeah.
Because AI is pretty adept at converting and reading just about anything you throw at it, right?
But it's usable by whoever the consumer of that data is. Surely that's not that difficult.
Are you talking about which AI is the consumer, or are we still on people consuming?
No, we're saying that for a building to be AI ready, we're saying that it has to have data that is usable and accessible. It's basically the framing that we're putting. How it is being used for really depends on the person or the AI. So I guess it's both
Yeah.
that could actually use it. It
Yeah.
actually doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah. Ron Bernstein pointed out something that I think is really an important part of this evolution is, at first having people involved. So having AI recommend, here's how I think you should spend your budget, or how you should prioritize, repairs or whatever it might be, as opposed to doing all of that stuff automatically. I think there is going to be an evolutionary period where we have man in the middle, as he says, for a while, until we put the guardrails and safeguards in to just let AI go by itself and take care of stuff. And that comes back to, at first there'll be less accessible data, less usable data, but over time I think that will improve, maybe in ways we don't fully understand yet, even.
But doesn't that speak to the decision-making part of it? We want buildings to be AI ready so that somebody can make decisions about what to do, whatever that decision.
More informed decisions, especially, right?
Right, right.
Because
And
people are making decisions today. How
Right, and
informed they are
there you
sometimes.
go.
Yeah.
So initially that would sound as though that should be more like humans that will make they'll make decisions. But I guess over time, some of that could also be AI.
Yeah.
Why not?
Think about a self-driving car.
There you go.
First versions, we here in Chandler, we're home of Waymo. So we've got Waymo cars driving all over the place here. And for the first few years, several years, there was always somebody behind the driving, the steering wheel. But now there's hardly anybody behind the steering wheels. They're just driving
Wow.
around, right? But it took a while to get there, get all the right data inputs, build the confidence, build the data models, and so forth. Do the testing of edge cases and situations that don't normally occur. So I can't imagine that buildings will go through any different kind of an evolution, right? The same thing will likely occur, just as applied to buildings instead of driving.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think the issues are obviously different, but from the AI understanding and usefulness, I think it should be quite likely the same.
I'd like
Jim?
to take a different slice at the problem here. I'd certainly agree with what everyone said, obviously about having data models and metadata and organization and tagging. All these things are great for effectively getting your building ready for AI. But I think that we really should take another tact at this and actually look at applications. So what is it that we would actually like AI to do? So if we can actually look at what making the building AI ready means, the thing I'd like to ask is for what, right? But what are the applications that we actually see? Tracy brings up self-driving cars. I think that's a great place to start, thinking about a self-driving building. But what are the detailed applications that people envision for that AI-ready building?
It's obviously going to have to interact with the grid because that's its feedstock. So that is evolving rapidly and many flavors. I think it's going to have to interact with the community. Some of the stuff that Kimon brought back from Scale was certainly pointing at that the building not only has to work when it's connected to the clouds, but when it is disconnected because of power failures or disaster, then it needs even more to have like subnetworks. And there was a lot of talk about that got me thinking. The idea of a cell phone in a house being able to take over and set up some ad hoc networks so it could actually call out and actually provide information about a house that is off the grid. And I think that's, the kinds of things that we haven't thought so much of is the building as an interacting identity inside of a city, and just that bigger piece. Some of the stuff that Chemo exposed at Scale got me thinking a whole bunch of new directions.
You bring up a good point. I was in a conversation this morning with some gentlemen from Europe, and one of the things that they talked about, and this goes back to Linux for buildings. Their point and their view of things was there are some technologies that are further along in terms of thinking beyond just the building And AI is going to accelerate that, and smart cities, lack of a better term, kind of get here faster and become more critical, to your point, Ken, or more obtainable, maybe is the right word, when we start to deploy some of this stuff. But I think you hit the nail on the head on one of the kind of obvious ones is energy optimization, and not just scheduling and optimizing chillers and things like that, but when to buy electricity, and when to pre-cool or not pre-cool, and so on and so forth, right? Tying a bunch of things together that we hadn't, typically isn't done currently.
I think all these operational things are very important, Tracy, but I think there are other slices to the pie that we can get into that are completely orthogonal. So cybersecurity is certainly one of them. How do I tell that my asset is cyber secure? And that could mean the IT networks as well as the OT networks, other things that are maybe not operational. The financial well-being of the building, how tenants come and tenants go, what the revenue models are, what the cost models are, certainly tangential to operating considerations, but over and above them as well. And I think, if you look at other regulatory issues that the building's involved with, there's another silo of things that we can look into. And those don't necessarily have to be energy or carbon, but maybe even zoning or expansion, or many of the other angles that are involved in owning or managing property. Weather-related events, and we could go on, but I think there's a lot of headroom for AI here.
Don't you think that a lot of these applications are, one way or another, a lot of them are being done today? It's more a question of how they are being done, as opposed to how it would be done with AI.
Absolutely. I think that
Software.
the conversation, Steve, is about how AI is going to disrupt and reconfigure these silos.
Yeah,
But I
exactly.
think that because we have a lot of data and we're in a key operations position, which is heretofore never had its information transmitted to those other silos, I think it puts us in a pole position for some of that disruptive behavior in terms
Yeah.
of value we can capture as an industry.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a good point, though. We keep talking about how can AI improve things we're already doing. I am really interested in the first novel application of AI in a building, something we haven't thought about that isn't just making things work faster, smarter, more integrated, the kind of the obvious stuff. What have we not thought of that AI might enable within buildings that we just haven't even gone there yet?
Well, I think that I would start the thinking, Tracy, by looking vertically. In this conversation or in this industry, we often treat buildings as a horizontal market, and it really isn't. If you're in the hospital business, you're in the if you're in the healthcare business, you're in the hospital business. If you're in the higher ed business, you're in the higher ed business. If you're an automotive manufacturer, you're in the car business. You're not in the plastics manufacturing business. So I think that the value propositions will gravitate around the vertical markets, and
They serve.
commercial real estate is a little further afield because it touches many of those other market spaces horizontally. But I don't think that's where the value is. I think that the AI value and the systems value is vertical by vertical.
Yeah, there's nobody that ever built a building to save energy. They built the building to teach or to heal or to work or to build. And so mapping mapping all these different data silos to the objective of why the building was built is that's where, that's going to be the fun application.
Or what it's being used for today, because a lot of buildings, my office was built to be a furniture factory in 1880. It ain't doing that right now.
Good point.
Yeah, one of the key questions, again, it was Dave Mosby from the state of Missouri that had that quote of nobody ever built a building to save energy. But one of the key questions that he used, all that amassing of all the data that we bring to him in binders or on 7 different screens, was which buildings should I get rid of? Which buildings are not performing government very well? And that's the way he would talk about it. It's like the reason the state of Missouri had buildings was not to save energy. It was not. It was to create jobs, probably, but the main reason for the state of Missouri to have buildings was to perform government. And so that was the top level KPI, was, where are we performing government the best, and where are we doing it the worst, and which buildings should we get rid of? And I think that's the same with whether you got a restaurant or whether you're building cars or furniture or whatever.
Yeah, just going there on the restaurant front. That is something I've been working towards for a while. Taking a portfolio of restaurants, input, as part of the data set, some of the key contextual bits of data, how much square foot, how many fryers do they have? How many grills do they have? Are they south facing with lots of windows or north facing with lots of windows? And start to just turn it loose on a tool that will stack rank these, from a performance standpoint. And it doesn't just have to be energy. There can be other aspects to that. And come up with something that can guide an owner who might be considering shutting down locations and so forth on something more than just profitability, perhaps, right? On food sales. There could be more to it than that. But I can't wait to get to where we can do that. And then more importantly, part of the vision here would be, okay, I'm a McDonald's owner, I'm a Burger King owner. How do I compare to Wendy's or, Subways or, fine dining restaurants even in some of this operation? That's when it really starts to get kind of interesting. And then feeding that information back to the architects, and one of the things in fast food is every 7 to 10 years, there's kind of a refresh of the brand, new buildings, new building designs. Feed all that information back to the architects on the new building designs.
Yeah, we had an architect, again, back in the day, that she described that they have 100% dissatisfaction with what they do for a living, because nobody likes their buildings. Everybody complains about their buildings. And she really wanted to have, she wanted to be able to have data from all these different systems to be able to figure out why it is that the buildings are performing so badly for their expected job, which that was a great perspective to have, because, again, they would do surveys and people, there was never got, 10 out of 10 from anybody ever. And so she's desperate to have like real-time use and real-time data to be able to figure out, gosh, why are we doing our job so badly?
So the question that's been sort of rattling in my brain listening to this conversation is that, what is fundamentally different with AI? Because in many ways, we've always been wanting to make buildings be better. What's so different here with AI? Is it just the magnitude and the speed of amount of data? What's the difference here?
I'll start and say scale is a big part of that, right? And acceleration is a big part of that. So I suspect when we properly start applying AI to some of the problems, even that we talk about on Monday Live, that we are going to solve problems in quotations that we thought we had much faster, and they might not quite be the problems we thought they were. So I think that is going, as an accelerant agent, that is a big piece of this for sure. And getting to, anyone who's been in the industry for more than a couple of years has some version of a smart building in their brain, and if they walked through and they were giving a tour of a building 80% of what they said would be the same as the next person. The other 20% would be applied to, is it a hospital or is it a factory or is it a pharmaceutical manufacturing, right? So I think getting to that point is a big piece of this whole thing, including a lot of the things we wrestle with in terms of interoperability and data availability and so forth, that we're going to see once we can put the ones and zeros on a wire somewhere. AI will help us figure out the context and how to use that information.
The thing that excites me is AI's ability to cross silos better than we can as humans. And to use a reference to the movie Repo Man, the cosmic unconsciousness, right? I mean, AI is becoming an authority on lots of different fields, and I think that it will be able to jump those silos better than we can.
That's a good point.
The thing that intrigues me most about the way AI does this differently to the way humans does it is that we can't handle the sort of the number of things that AI is capturing, right? So we tend to just look for the big numbers. We look for the top 1 or 2 or 3, the top 5 of whatever issues are. AI takes care of the bottom million, basically, and it doesn't break a sweat by doing that, right? We could never look at those million pieces of data. It just doesn't make sense for our sort of human, the way we think. It just doesn't make sense, and it just does it. So it's looking at very, very different sets of data in some ways, and it's coming up with sort of some things that we can improve on based on that data that was previously almost invisible to us. That's kind of the way I think about it. Was that too abstract?
Now, when we first started this conversation, I asked ChatGPT the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Somebody had made a comment about that. And it gave a really what you would expect kind of an answer. Then I said, do you have wisdom or knowledge? And it gave a good answer. I'll post it here. That's its answer. You know, I have knowledge, but it talks about the human experience in a human sense. And it says, you know, I can help people make wiser decisions, which is what we were talking about earlier. So.
And it even anticipated that question.
Well, my question would be, how do I teach you wisdom? Right? How can you learn wisdom?
Mistakes.
What?
Kimon's point is obviously valid. Assumes that humans have wisdom.
Many humans have knowledge.
That as well.
Yeah.
I always debate with, I have an electric car, and my wife is not necessarily, well, she's an electric car fan, but not a self-driving car fan, put it that way. And my argument inevitably comes back to, I'd rather have a computer driving the car than most of the people driving on the road these days. So.
As long as you didn't say that with the word "you" in it, you're okay.
I've been married 29 years as of yesterday, so yeah, I've got that one down.
Yeah.
So what do we need to do to make buildings more AI ready? What do we need to focus on? Usable, accessible data, apparently.
I don't
Yeah.
feel like we've talked a lot about the benefits to AI and the value. The first part of the sentence, the value, okay, and we've thought about how how big that circle is, that value circle is, started to let our minds go in different directions to expand the sandbox, if you will, of what value is going to look like. And I think that's great, but we haven't spent any time on the accessibility part. And I really would like to, we don't have a lot of time left on today's call, but I think that's really important, is that we have an in-depth conversation around accessibility.
That's
So
the
let's
cost.
stop there. Sorry?
Oh, well, that's the cost of getting, we kind of know what the benefits potentially are. But we don't know what the cost is to get to that point, because the accessibility is kind of this, well, we know how to make them accessible, but for some
But do
reason we
we?
haven't done it yet.
But do we? Because there's
As an example, when I was doing more of the data analytics piece, I could often run into a very fundamental problem from the building owner side, which is they did not want to make their building accessible to the outside world, period.
that's not a technical
It's not
challenge.
a technical issue.
It's
a policy
okay.
issue, right? And
Mhm.
and if we're going to enable AI, I would say we've got to overcome that, because the AI applications are going to live primarily in cloud platforms. Not to say they can't run locally, but when you look at the broader picture, to not have the building be accessible to the outside world over the internet seems like in my way of thinking, is a fundamental blocker to realizing this dream that we're talking about.
So, I mean, one would hope that that's a trend that would change, but is that true? Tracy, Jim, you interact with owners, let's put it that way. Do you see that trend changing at all?
I do, through technology. I think that, we've been in a position where we've had to get that data in the businesses I'm in for 25 years. And yes, there are barriers there. And yes, they are often more political than they are technical. But I think that as technology advances and as we get cybersecurity technology that we can make the owners more comfortable with, I think we can get them to open up the building automation data. The data that we don't often talk about on this call is data going the other way. It's really, really hard for us to get financial information out of an organization. So if I wanted to get data from other silos of the business, potentially enterprise reporting systems, counting systems, anything, that's very, very hard for people in our industry to get our hands on, because it's a different group. It's the CFO's department. And in the regular course of our business, we do not have intercourse with those people whatsoever. And often not even the operating people in the core business, right? So if you wanted to get into medical equipment or systems care, if you were monitoring gas distribution at a hospital, data coming the other way is almost impossible for us to get.
Yeah, I agree. I'll give you a perfect example. A long time ago, I don't know if I brought it up on Monday Live or just our Wednesday call, but I have an equivalence calculator for the restaurant industry that equates energy savings to number of transactions in a restaurant, right? That's one of the things that restaurants track. And for me to get what your average profit margin is or anything like that, I want to do something fun, like, hey, the energy savings we produce is the equivalent of selling, 1,200 more hamburgers last month. But I couldn't even get the basic financial information about what's the profitability of a hamburger. Like it's a guarded secret government.
Yeah, it's a deep trade secret, right?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And Jim, presumably, maybe they don't necessarily know it, but people in those either silos don't have access to our information either. Although
Right.
they may not know that they need it.
Exactly. And this is where we can use AI to bridge those silos potentially.
Even I have a little experience about talking with people, probably more at the, well, it'd be people who make software that we're talking about, the accounting and operational software and so forth in the restaurant industry. So I've approached a number of them over the years to have a conversation about integrating. And I get one of two responses, either absolutely zero vision and no interest. They can't imagine how having the kind of data that I'm collecting could be useful. And others are much more interested, although no killer app has come from it, let's say. But even simple things like providing energy, measured energy costs at a subsystem level, as opposed to just the meter, right? They get it from the utility bill now. That's their source of truth when it comes to energy consumption. So I think the problem is more, again, like Jim said, not technical. It's knowledge and politics. Ron put up a good point there. In the group too.
Well, there are a lot of audiences though that do want to understand the effectiveness, the competitiveness of their buildings, because their buildings are such an important part of, again, what they do. If they're a hospital or school or whatever, they do want to understand the effectiveness of their building. And again, we've been locked into energy for a long time, and we kind of keep saying energy, but energy is that $2 or $3 a square foot. The total cost is 30,
Right. Yeah.
And when we talk about the total cost and or liability and or effectiveness of the building, doing its job well, now we're talking about affecting that $300 or $3,000 number of if your building is performing well, selling more hamburgers. So there are a lot of people that are actually interested in the effectiveness of their building, and starting with them is probably the right place to go. And that's where, again, the AI, they kind of know what questions they'd like to be able to ask the building, and again, that kind of goes back to how well is the building, what are these different KPIs of building performance, which ones are the most important for how I teach or how I sell cars or whatever, and mapping that to the effectiveness of the building isn't terribly difficult. It's just AI is going to help speed all that up, but the translation from the different silos and then the adding it all up and putting the KPIs against it. AI is sitting there waiting for Steve to solve the accessibility problem.
Thanks, Ray. Glad I know what my job is starting today.
I just want to highlight that is the problem that is in the way of us getting to this.
Yeah.
Accessible and usable.
One of the things that I use AI for on a regular basis is brainstorming. I would love to throw a big list of data sets from all different parts of operations of building, not just our parts, and start asking it, what could you do with all this kind of data? Right? How would you use, runtime of compressors or average room temperatures or whatever to improve operations? And let it help us figure that out.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting exercise, because you can even sort of put in like the profitability of a hamburger is 0.1 of a penny or whatever it is, and it'll be able to calculate all sorts of things, comparing that with all manner of things.
Yeah, That would be interesting. For sure.
Okay, I think we are coming to the, well, we've passed the top of the hour, so we should bring this to a wrap. Been a great conversation. We'll get the video up next couple of days, and we will continue this next week. Exactly how we'll continue it, we're not sure, but we'll still be talking about AI-ready buildings. Are we AI-ready? So we'll
I want to
continue that
hear
next
from
week.
David next week about what's important to
ne-
him.
Yeah, next week is David talking the whole hour.
Yeah.
David Cass just suggested saving the chat.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's all.
I
think we
actually
should do that.
have notes ready, so I'm over prepared for next
Yeah.
week.
You're over prepared for next week. All right, next
There
week's
is,
gonna be the
anyone
David
who
Wade
wants
show.
to save the chat, if you right click down in the lower right corner on the three dots, you can save the chat. I don't know where. it's-
Tracy, in programming terms, those three dots are called meatballs.
Meatballs.
Yep. If
That's
they're
funny because
vertical-
we call the
if
three
it's-
lines at the top the hamburger.
Hamburger.
Yeah, exactly. That's a hamburger. These are meatballs. If the three dots are vertically,
There
it's
we
a
go.
kebab.
Okay.
So
There you go.
that's my contribution to today's
I was
call.
gonna say, I
Thanks,
told you
Dave.
we needed David to talk more.
Thanks, David.
Have a great
Thanks,
week,
everyone.
guys.
Have
All
a great
right.
week. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.